So the last step I'm going to get into is the rest of the troubleshooting, like no power, your overhead lights aren't on, no display, your claw won't close, things like that. So we're going to claw not closing first just to make it easy. I'm up here. So the first thing you do, if you come in and you find out your claw's dropping down, it's not closing. Okay. One of two things well, a couple things could be happening. If you go over and close and it drops, it goes down, it hits the bottom, it does not close. Okay, it comes all the way up. When it gets to the top, and I'll show you how this works. We'll make it do it real quick. So it gets to the top, then it closes, then it comes over the chute and drops down, unwinds itself completely, and then goes back out. That's because the upper switch never told it was down on the bottom. Either it wasn't high enough product, your string wasn't long enough, or it hit the bottom, fell over, and this arm didn't go down or up like I said, which closed that upper switch to tell it it's down. So let's say we're going to go out here and play this. Okay? So we're going to do this, reset it one more time. Make sure you're going to go in here, you're going to play the game. Let's say we're over here and we're playing this game, and I drop it. It drops all the way down. As you see that, it's winding the wrong way right now. That's because it was out of string. It didn't know where it was at. All it knew was, hey, we got to wind up. You know. So as you see, it never closed till it got to the top. That's because the up-down switch, the up switch said, hey, I'm up. Where did we come from? So the board said, okay, close, go home, let's reset ourselves. So it came over. That's the first thing to check. I have a lot of people call me and they tell me it's only closing halfway up. And then it goes home on the closed, and then it unwinds itself. And I tell them it's not closing halfway up. It's closing when it gets to the top and closes that upper switch. Because at that point, that's when the board figured out, hey, we never made it to the bottom. So after they go back and watch it and talk to me while they're watching it, they realize what I'm talking about. That's the first thing you need to look at. That's generally the problem with these, is it went down and didn't know where it was at. Either the string was way too short, it couldn't make it to the product. It all comes to one thing. It comes to this arm with this roller and this switch. If that pressure that comes off that arm doesn't go down and close that switch, it'll never close the claw down on the product, ever. So that's the first thing. Okay, let's say that's working fine. We know that's closing. We know it's dropping. We know the string ain't letting too much out. We know that arm's coming down and the switch is closing. We know the switch is good. More than likely the wire's good. That leaves, okay, then it's got to be a claw problem or a board problem. So you would come in first thing and do your claw test mode. You would flip the switch up, you get an 04 error code, turn the machine off, back on again, hit your drop button one time. At that point, let's say it says down here, right now it says 30. Let's say it has nothing down here. If there's no voltage on this meter right here at all, it says 0, then there's not a problem probably up there. It could be, but probably not. More than likely the problem is going to be the board. First thing you need to do is check your F2 fuse. Check your F2 fuse. If it's blown and you cannot test it by looking at it, you need to use a meter and ohm it out. If it's a bad F2 fuse, replace the fuse first and try it again. If the same thing happens, then you might have a bad relay. It's got a burn spot on the relay or something like that. Let's say you have power here now. So let's go back to this. We got 30 volts. With 30 volts here, we need to go up top then. And you go up top, and the first thing you're going to test is for voltage, DC voltage. Okay, get your meter out, put it on here, go to DC voltage and go to either the two yellows or the yellow and white, or the two that come from your claw itself, from the claw coil. You go there, oh my goodness, I got 30 voltage. So there's 30 volts there. I know if there's 30 volts here and there's 30 volts here, since they're wired to the same spot on the board, I know my board's working. Can't be anything else because you got voltage here and you got voltage there. Okay, at that point, you got a bad claw coil. Guaranteed. It's either a broke wire somewhere in there, and we replace the whole thing from where it screws into the two pins here all the way to the solenoid, to the case. That's all one piece, the coil and the black cable. Okay, let's say you have no voltage here, you have voltage there. Then you need to go to the back left corner on this connector at the two yellow wires, or white and yellow, whichever ones you have, and test it there and see if you have 30 volts. More than likely you will. If you have it there, you should have it back there. If the problem is no voltage here, or there is voltage back here at this plug, but there's no voltage here, then you've got a broke wire in either this wire harness that goes into the center car, somewhere in here, through here, tied here, or from here to the back corner, or you got a pin that's pulled out back here. These two connectors for the gantry. The left one here, as you see, has 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 oranges, 2 browns. That controls all of your 48 voltage, your 3 motors, and your claw to close. So one set of wires, reds is for your up and down, oranges is for your left and right, front and back, brown is for your, orange is for left and right, brown is for front and back, and then yellow is for your claw to close. The other switches, the other wires, is for all your switches. You have 2 blues, 2 purples, 2 greens, a pink, a black, and I think a gray. With those are only goes to your switches. As you see, you got switches here, blue and pink, gray and black. Over here, you got 2 purples, you got 2 blues. So it's really simple the way they did it. This color code, all the blue, green, pink, purple, is switches, and the other ones are yellows, orange, reds, and brown, is for all your motors and your claw to close. Okay, so once you got that, you know either if you have voltage here, you got a bad coil. If you have no voltage here, you've got a broke wire from somewhere to there to there. There's only 2 choices. I mean, there's only 2 things that can actually be wrong with it. Well, once you got done with that, you've got a new coil put in there, or your wire fixed, you should be good. It should take off and start working. Your next thing you're going to have to go to from there is, let's say you have your machine goes out to play, it drops down, and the claw don't close, or the claw tries to close, and everything shuts off. You do the machine just boom, it blank, it goes blank. So you look over here and your display's blank. You go down to the board where the power supply and the board is, and you look at your power supply, and your power supply is on. You know, you got a green light or whatever. What happens is the power supply, when as it's going bad, cannot handle the load from the claw coil anymore, because it pulls a lot of amps when it first goes to close. It goes down, tries to close, you got that heavy amperage, and then you got the motor trying to pull up at the same time. So there's a lot of amperage going to pull. Let's say that's what's happening. If that's the case, you probably have a bad power supply. The board doesn't have to, it went blank because the board, unlike a computer, once it shuts off, you have to leave it off for a few seconds, then you can turn it back on to reset it. So the power supply shuts off, it shuts off so fast it turns itself right back on. It's just it's a massive draw, it shuts down, shuts it right back on. The board cannot react to that. So you come up to the machine, turn it off, turn it on, you know, it works fine for a minute, and then goes down, tries to close, and the same thing happens again. Either you got a dead short somewhere in the claw coil or the up and down motor, because that's the 2 things that are trying to operate, or you got a bad power supply. Generally speaking, it's a power supply problem. The power supply is an ATX style power supply on all of our machines, interchangeable from day one. So with that being said, as you can see, it is an ATX style, like in a computer. It's got a fan, on-off switch, power input, 120 volts, and then power outputs underneath the, usually on the top, but it depends on how they put them in. There is a knob to adjust it, and there is a green light, LED light. That green LED should be green. It could be down lower into the orange or up into the red, depending on how you adjust it. We stay in the green. I mean, it's going to be pretty close to your 5 volts. It does carry four voltages, 5, 12, 24, and 48, and the fan must be running. A lot of people get in here and say, no, it's not a power supply problem, and then I find out the fan's not running. It's a power supply problem if the fan's not running. I guarantee it. So, first thing I would check if you're having issues like that is put a new power supply in it. My guess is going to be, especially if the fan's not running, you got bad power supply. So that's almost guaranteed. Only other thing I can think of at this time is the next thing you need to get into is to find out about, you know, if you're having a light problem. If you get into this, you walk up to the machine and the overhead lights are off. No power, no display, you don't see anything. Generally speaking, that is a 120 volt problem. Okay, the lights are connected to 120 volts. They're not low voltage out of the power supply. So, one of two things can happen. Either you got a bad power supply and it's causing a short to the main incoming power, 120 volts, or you got overhead lights that are probably bad. It's something in the 120 volt line. Generally, it's overhead light problem. First thing I would do is come up to your machine and say, okay, overhead lights are off, no power. Whether the bill acceptor's on or not, it's wired generally directly to the back wall. Everything else goes through this box right here. So come up to your yellow box and look at it and go, okay, this is your power incoming. You got 3 or 4, depending on how old the machine is. There's a bigger square black area here and a thin one on this side. This bigger square, if you look at it, has a symbol of a fuse. That's your fuse. Pop it like that with a screwdriver and pull it up and out. As you see, there's a fuse in there. Okay, that is your main power fuse. The power comes from the back wall, through the box, up to the front door switch, on-off switch in the front door and the control panel, back to this box on this side of it plug, and that what powers these two. So if you're having that problem, the first thing you need to do is check that box. My guess is going to be you got a blown fuse. Once again, you cannot test that fuse by looking at it. You need to take a meter out and put a meter on it and ohm it out and see if it's bad. If the fuse is bad, replace that fuse and put it back in there. Before you turn the machine on, if you know what caused the problem, generally it's the overhead lights on these newer machines, the ballast goes bad and they burn. If that's the case, before you do that, go to the back left corner up there, unplug the two ballast. You got 2 bigger connectors and 2 small 2-pin connectors. 2 small 2-pin connectors are blue and brown wires. Might be different cranes, but most of these are blue and brown. Disconnect those 2, put your fuse back in, plug it all back together and turn the machine back on. If it comes up and runs and everything works except for your lights, you've got 1 or 2 bad ballast or 2 bad bulbs. Almost always the problem. Everybody that calls here when they can't get it, they figure out that it's power, complete power. It's not just a board problem. Now, once in a while, you'll see it is a power supply problem that's causing that fuse to blow. Something went bad on the 120 inside, but it's not generally, it's the overhead lights. So that's all of it, I think. I think we should be good. If anybody has any questions, they can call me anytime. Thanks.